Good evening to all. My name is Bianca Popescu, and I am a proud Minds Matter alumni from the class of 2022. Tonight, I present to you draft 13 of this speech. Fitting, really, because it mirrors the ongoing edits we all make in the rough draft that is our lives. Standing here is an honor, not just as a speaker, but as someone who, like all of you, has been shaped by moments of guidance, trauma, and above all, grit. For as long as I could remember, I was the girl with the plan. Everyone around me knew it too. At 17, I knew I was going to be the first dentist in my family. Why, you might ask? Because from a young age, I loved going to the dentist and I knew that they made good money, which was good enough reasons for an 8-year-old to commit to an idea for life. But truthfully, it was my mother who said to me one day in a dental office that jobs in healthcare were stable. And I knew that's what I sought, stability. I believed that once I got into college, everything would fall into place. But on this journey of adulting, I've learned that life rarely unfolds as neatly as we've planned. But nonetheless, I was determined. For my journey was never just about ambition. It was about survival. I grew up in a home shaped by struggle where my father battled alcoholism. I grew up ashamed of where I came from and fearful in places that were supposed to feel safe. But more than anything, I was afraid. Afraid that my mother and I would forever be trapped in a cycle of poverty, feeling the effects of my father's addiction, and never finding the stability that I desperately craved for us. His inability to provide meant that my mother and I had to take on double the emotional and financial responsibilities of raising 2 children. She did her best to fill the roles of 2 parents, an immense challenge on its own, made even harder by the fact that she immigrated here from communist Romania, a place where opportunity was scarce and survival was everything. But it also meant that higher education in the United States was unfamiliar territory for her. And turning this dream into reality would require more than just hard work and good grades. I would have to navigate it on my own. The weight of our circumstances shaped both me and my older brother. Despite receiving a full-ride scholarship, the hardships that we faced impacted his ability to pursue higher education. Meaning it was up to me, because through it all, my family understood one thing: education was my way out. My family has spent generations solely surviving, but I am determined to do more than just survive. I want to build a life of purpose. I wanted to do so without increasing any of the burdens on my family, so I made a promise to myself that I would only ever rely on my mother's love for support, and I would figure out the cost and the process of higher education on my own. I believe the key to making that happen was through mentorship and self-discovery, 2 vital elements that brought me to Minds Matter in the first place. I still remember walking into a classroom I had never been in before, surrounded by people I didn't know, and breathing in that oddly specific high school air that smells like dry erase markers and algebra. But little did I know that in that strange room, I'd be introduced to one of the greatest people I'd ever get to know, my randomly assigned mentor, Katie. She's also in the audience, so can everyone give her a little round of applause? What started as a slightly awkward icebreaker session turned into one of the most meaningful relationships of my life. As a student in the program, I was immersed in weekly workshops that pushed me to grow in ways I hadn't expected. One that stood out the most were our identity workshops, where we were asked to really think about who we were, at our core. Naturally, most of us had no idea, so we did what any confused teenager would do, and we turned to online quizzes. Do you want to know your purpose in life? There's a BuzzFeed quiz for that. Somehow, in between what type of bread are you and which rom-com character matches your emotional damage, we found ourselves asking questions that actually mattered. The identity workshops weren't about finding the right answers. They were about getting honest. Slowly, we began to recognize what made us who we were, and more importantly, who we were becoming. It wasn't about discovering ourselves in a quiz result. It was about learning to listen to a quiet voice inside, one that had been there all along. And that voice, the one that this program has helped me to hear, has carried me far. Thanks to the resources and the support that I found here, I am now a junior at the University of Colorado Boulder. I will be the first in my family to earn a bachelor's degree. And in May of 2026, I'll graduate with a degree in economics. But it hasn't always been easy. I worked nearly full-time during undergrad, have failed organic chemistry, faced imposter syndrome, and burnout. At one point, I commuted 2 hours a day because I couldn't afford on-campus housing. I even had the university withdrawal form open more times than I would care to admit. But deep down, I knew I couldn't quit. Thanks to the dedication of a generous foundation that mutually supports Minds Matter and CU Boulder students, I was awarded a scholarship that I've used to help pay for housing, which not only eased the financial strain, but has improved my academic performance. It has allowed me to stop and breathe for a moment and reflect on how far I've come, especially in the past year. I've embarked on what some might call a journey of self-discovery. I would love to call it a midlife crisis, but according to Google, adults under the age of 40 don't qualify for one. So I'd like to call it a beginning life crisis, because for the first time, I challenged everything I thought I knew about my future, and more importantly, why I had chosen it. I could always picture it, working with patients, fixing smiles, bringing my care to the community through dentistry. But when I started to grow increasingly unhappy in my biochemistry courses and on my path, I panicked. In search of answers, I turned to the best place that I knew, books. That's when I read Tuesdays with Morrie. If you haven't read it, it's a memoir by Mitch Albom, where he shares the life lessons he learned from his former college professor, Morrie. The two reconnected later in life and began meeting every week while Morrie is dying of Lou Gehrig's disease. Their conversations were about life, love, loss, and most importantly, the courage to embrace change. As I kept reading, I couldn't help but to think of a similar wisdom that I received from my own mentor, Katie. I realized that I had my own version of those Tuesdays. I had Tuesdays with Katie. I didn't need to search through books. I just had to speak up to her about my internal panic, even if my voice trembled. Katie has been my mentor, my guide, my Morrie for the past 6 years. During one of my lowest points of my undergrad journey, we grew closer in our weekly check-in calls, and it was one of those Tuesdays with Katie where I finally said aloud what had been weighing on me. I don't think pursuing dentistry straight out of undergrad is what I meant to do. Simultaneously, I had the privilege of watching Katie navigate change in her own life with courage and clarity. Like Morrie, she didn't just offer advice, she lived it. It's okay to reinvent yourself, she told me, as many times as it takes. Her greatest lesson taught me that grit isn't just about perseverance. It's about the courage to see yourself clearly and choose a different path when your heart calls for it. Letting go of that original plan didn't mean that I was letting my family down. It meant that I was stepping into purpose. I decided to pursue economics while holding on to my dream of dentistry because I recognized that I could do both, even if it takes me just a little while longer. That dream is still mine. Reinvention is about speaking up, even when your voice trembles. You deserve to explore who you are, not just who you thought you'd be. That's why programs like this matter, not just because genius has no zip code, but because we all need a Katie, someone who sees us before we see ourselves. We all need someone who believes in us and teaches us to have grit. And tonight, I hope you remember that you can be that person for someone else. So as I stand before you tonight, as a student and a daughter who's been shaped by moments of guidance, trauma, and above all, grit, I am proof that it is possible to stop surviving and start living with a passion to find a purpose. Thank you.